Picture this. You're lying awake at 3 in the morning, your mind racing with worries about tomorrow's presentation, replaying that awkward conversation from last week, spiraling through scenarios that may never happen. Your thoughts have hijacked your peace, stolen your sleep, and left you feeling powerless in your own mind. But what if I told you that over 2,000 years ago, a slave named Epictetus discovered the secret to breaking free from this mental prison? What if the most powerful emperor in history, Marcus Aurelius, used these same principles to maintain inner peace while governing an empire and fighting wars on distant frontiers? What if you could learn to control your thoughts instead of letting them control you? This isn't just another self-help video promising quick fixes. This is about ancient wisdom that has stood the test of time, philosophy forged in the crucible of real human suffering and triumph. The Stoics weren't armchair philosophers theorizing about life from ivory towers. They were slaves who became teachers, emperors who faced plagues and wars, and statesmen who navigated the treacherous waters of Roman politics. They discovered something profound about the human mind and how to master it. Today, you're going to learn their secrets. You're going to discover how to take back control of your thoughts, and in doing so, reclaim your life. By the end of this journey, you'll understand why Marcus Aurelius wrote in his personal journal that you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. The story begins in ancient Greece around 300 BCE, when a merchant named Zeno of Citium was shipwrecked and lost everything he owned. Sitting in Athens, financially ruined and seemingly defeated, he wandered into a bookshop and heard someone reading from the works of Socrates. That moment of devastation became his awakening. He realized that losing his external possessions had freed him to discover something far more valuable: the power of his own mind. Zeno founded what we now know as Stoicism, a philosophy that would influence emperors, slaves, and everyone in between for centuries to come. But why should you care about what happened over 2 millennia ago? Because the human mind hasn't changed. We still struggle with the same fundamental challenges: anxiety about the future, regret about the past, feeling overwhelmed by circumstances beyond our control. The Stoics understood something crucial that modern psychology is only now rediscovering. Most of our suffering comes not from what happens to us, but from our thoughts about what happens to us. They developed practical techniques for training the mind that are just as relevant today as they were in ancient Rome. Let's start with the most fundamental Stoic principle, one that changed everything for a young slave who would become one of history's greatest teachers. Epictetus was born into slavery in the 1st century CE, his very name meaning acquired one. He lived in chains, suffered physical abuse, and had no control over the basic circumstances of his life. Yet this man, who had every reason to feel powerless, discovered the ultimate source of human freedom. He taught that there are only 2 categories in life: things that are up to you and things that are not up to you. Your thoughts, your values, your responses to events, these are up to you. Everything else, the weather, other people's actions, the past, the future, even your own body to some extent, these are not up to you. Imagine Epictetus in his small room, perhaps after a day of harsh treatment, training his mind with this simple but revolutionary distinction. While his master controlled his body, Epictetus realized that his thoughts remained his own. He could choose how to interpret his suffering, what meaning to assign to his circumstances, and how to respond internally to whatever happened to him. This wasn't passive resignation. It was the discovery of the one realm where every human being is truly sovereign. When you really understand this principle, when you stop wasting mental energy on things you cannot control and focus entirely on what you can control, your life transforms. You stop being a victim of circumstances and become the author of your own experience. How do you apply this today? Every time you catch yourself worrying about something, ask yourself, is this something I can control or influence? If the answer is no, practice letting it go. If the answer is yes, focus your energy on taking action rather than worrying. When you're stuck in traffic, you can't control the traffic, but you can control your response. You can choose to use that time for reflection, listening to something educational, or simply practicing patience. When someone criticizes you unfairly, you can't control their words. but you can control whether you let those words define your self-worth. The second transformative principle comes from Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor who ruled the Roman Empire at its height. Despite having unlimited power and wealth, Marcus faced incredible challenges: a devastating plague that killed millions, barbarian invasions on multiple fronts, personal tragedies including the loss of children, and the constant burden of governing an empire. Yet his personal journal, which we know as Meditations, reveals a man who maintained inner tranquility through the practice of negative visualization and acceptance of impermanence. Marcus would regularly imagine losing everything he valued: his position, his health, his loved ones. This wasn't morbid pessimism, it was mental training. By contemplating loss before it occurred, he reduced the power of attachment and fear over his mind. He wrote, "Loss is nothing else but change, and change is nature's delight." Picture the emperor in his tent on the Germanic frontier, perhaps after receiving news of another outbreak of plague in Rome, practicing this mental discipline. Instead of being crushed by the weight of responsibility and uncertainty, he used these challenges as opportunities to strengthen his philosophical practice. You can use this same technique in your daily life. Spend a few minutes each morning imagining that today might be your last day with your loved ones in your current job or in good health. This isn't meant to create anxiety, but to cultivate gratitude and reduce your attachment to outcomes. When you truly accept that everything in life is temporary, you stop taking things for granted and start appreciating what you have right now. You also become more resilient when changes inevitably occur, because you've already mentally prepared for them. Seneca, the wealthy advisor to emperors and one of Rome's greatest writers, contributed another crucial insight about controlling thoughts: the power of voluntary discomfort. Despite his riches, Seneca regularly practiced poverty, sleeping on the floor, eating simple foods, and wearing rough clothes. He understood that comfort makes us mentally soft and fearful of losing what we have. By voluntarily experiencing discomfort, he trained his mind to be less dependent on external circumstances for happiness. Imagine Seneca in his luxurious villa, deliberately choosing to sleep on a hard floor and eat bread and water, while his servants wondered if their master had lost his mind. But Seneca knew exactly what he was doing. He was inoculating himself against the fear of loss and proving to his mind that he could be content with very little. This practice gave him tremendous psychological freedom. He could enjoy his wealth without being enslaved by it, because he knew he could be happy without it. You can adapt this principle by regularly stepping outside your comfort zone. Take cold showers, skip meals occasionally, walk instead of driving when possible, or spend time in nature without your usual comforts. These small acts of voluntary discomfort build mental resilience and reduce your dependence on external circumstances for well-being. They also help you distinguish between what you actually need and what you merely want, leading to greater contentment and less anxiety about losing things. The Stoics also understood something profound about the relationship between thoughts and emotions. They recognized that our initial emotional reactions to events are often automatic and beyond our immediate control, but our sustained emotional states are largely determined by the stories we tell ourselves about those events. Epictetus taught that we are disturbed not by things themselves, but by our judgments about things. This insight puts enormous power back in your hands. Consider how this played out in the life of Cato the Younger, a Roman senator known for his unwavering integrity. When Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon and civil war became inevitable, Cato could have despaired about the end of the Roman Republic. Instead, he chose to see this crisis as an opportunity to demonstrate his principles. Even when facing defeat and death, he maintained his dignity and philosophical composure. His thoughts about the situation, not the situation itself, determined his experience. When something frustrating happens to you today, pause and examine the story you're telling yourself about it. Are you catastrophizing? Are you taking it personally when it might have nothing to do with you? Are you assuming malicious intent when incompetence or different priorities might explain someone's actions? By changing the narrative in your mind, you can dramatically change your emotional experience. This isn't about denying reality or pretending bad things are good. It's about choosing the most accurate and helpful interpretation of events. The practice of morning reflection, was central to Stoic mental training. Marcus Aurelius would begin each day by reminding himself of fundamental truths about human nature and the world. He would prepare his mind for the challenges ahead by remembering that he would encounter difficult people, unexpected setbacks, and his own imperfections. This wasn't pessimism, it was realistic preparation that prevented disappointment and reactivity. Picture the emperor rising before dawn in his military camp, taking time to center his mind before facing the demands of leadership. He might remind himself that the angry general who would soon storm into his tent was acting from his own understanding of good and evil, that the barbarian tribes threatening the border were following their own nature, and that his own frustrations and desires were natural but not necessarily wise guides for action. By starting his day with this philosophical preparation, Marcus set himself up to respond to challenges with wisdom rather than mere emotion. You can create your own morning reflection practice. Spend 5 to 10 minutes each morning considering what challenges you might face that day and how you want to respond to them. Remind yourself of your values and priorities. Visualize yourself handling difficult situations with patience, courage, and wisdom. This mental rehearsal programs your mind to respond more thoughtfully when those situations actually arise. You're training your thoughts to serve your highest self rather than your most reactive impulses. The Stoics also developed sophisticated techniques for dealing with negative thoughts and emotions when they arise. They didn't try to suppress or ignore difficult feelings. Instead, they learned to observe them with detachment and wisdom. Seneca wrote extensively about anger, calling it temporary madness, and developing practical methods for cooling the fires of rage before they consumed rational judgment. When Seneca felt anger rising, he would immediately begin analyzing it. Where did this anger come from? What story was he telling himself? Was his anger justified? And even if it was, would acting on it lead to good outcomes? By engaging his rational mind, he could prevent his emotions from hijacking his behavior. He understood that anger might arise automatically, but nurturing and acting on that anger was a choice. You can use this same approach with any difficult emotion. When you notice anxiety, anger, sadness, or frustration arising, instead of fighting it or being swept away by it, become curious about it. What thoughts are feeding this emotion? What would happen if you simply observed the feeling without acting on it? Often, you'll find that emotions naturally fade when you stop feeding them with repetitive thoughts and when you don't resist them with internal struggle. Perhaps the most challenging Stoic practice is the discipline of desire, learning to want what happens rather than demanding that what you want should happen. This doesn't mean becoming passive or giving up your goals. It means holding your preferences lightly and finding peace regardless of outcomes. Marcus Aurelius expressed this beautifully when he wrote about accepting whatever the universe brings, whether it's roses or thorns. Think about how this might have applied when Marcus received news that another of his children had died. The natural human response is to rage against such loss, to demand that the universe be different than it is. But Marcus had trained his mind to accept even the most painful realities while still grieving appropriately. He could feel the full weight of his loss without adding the extra suffering that comes from fighting reality itself. This principle can revolutionize your relationship with disappointment and setbacks. When things don't go according to your plans, instead of wasting energy on resentment or frustration, you can ask yourself, how can I work with this situation as it actually is? This shift from resistance to acceptance doesn't make you weak or passive. It frees up mental energy for constructive action and creative problem solving. The Stoics understood that virtue was the only true good, because it's the only thing that's entirely up to you. External things like wealth, health, reputation, and even relationships are indifferent in Stoic terminology, meaning they're neither inherently good nor bad. What makes them good or bad is how you use them and how they affect your character. This insight liberates you from the endless anxiety of trying to control outcomes and redirects your focus toward what you can always control, your own choices and character. Epictetus, despite his physical limitations and social status, was truly free because he focused entirely on developing his wisdom, courage, justice, and self-discipline. These virtues couldn't be taken away by any external force. A wealthy person who lacks virtue is actually poorer than a virtuous person who lacks money, because the virtuous person possesses something of lasting value that no one can steal. When you align your sense of success and self-worth with your character, rather than your circumstances, you become virtually unshakable. You can lose your job, your health, or your relationships, and still maintain your dignity and peace of mind if you've cultivated virtue. This doesn't mean you don't care about external things, but you don't depend on them for your fundamental well-being. The practice of evening reflection complemented the morning preparation in Stoic training. Seneca would end each day by examining his thoughts, words, and actions, not to judge himself harshly, but to learn and improve. He would ask himself where he had acted according to his principles and where he had fallen short. This wasn't self-flagellation, it was the kind of honest self-assessment that leads to genuine growth. Picture Seneca in his study after a long day of political maneuvering and business dealings, reviewing his interactions with the same care a craftsman might examine his work. Where had he spoken from wisdom rather than ego? Where had he let his emotions dictate his responses? What could he learn from the day's challenges? This practice of reflective awareness helped him gradually align his actual behavior with his philosophical ideals. You can end each day with a similar practice. Spend a few minutes reviewing your thoughts and actions. Where did you respond from your highest self, and where did you react from old patterns? What triggered strong emotions, and how did you handle them? What did you learn about yourself? This kind of gentle self-examination, done with curiosity rather than judgment, accelerates personal growth and helps you catch negative thought patterns before they become entrenched habits. The Stoics also recognized the importance of memento mori, remembering death. This wasn't morbid fascination with mortality, but a practical technique for maintaining perspective and urgency about what truly matters. When you remember that your time is limited and uncertain, you naturally focus on what's most important and waste less energy on trivial concerns. Marcus Aurelius frequently reminded himself that he and everyone he knew would eventually die, that the Roman Empire itself would one day crumble, and that even the memory of their struggles would fade. Rather than depressing him, this awareness motivated him to live with greater intention and compassion. If everything is temporary, then every moment becomes precious, and every opportunity to act with virtue becomes significant. When you're caught up in petty grievances, social media drama, or status competitions, remembering your mortality can instantly restore perspective. Will this matter when you're on your deathbed? Will you be proud of how you spent your mental energy on these concerns? Death is the great equalizer that reveals what's truly important: love, growth, contribution, and character. The final principle that ties everything together is the view from above, a mental exercise where you imagine yourself from a cosmic perspective. Marcus Aurelius would visualize himself and his problems from high above, seeing first his city, then his region, then the earth itself as a tiny speck in a vast universe. This practice instantly puts personal concerns in perspective and connects you to something larger than your individual struggles. From this elevated viewpoint, many of the thoughts that normally dominate your mind reveal themselves as less significant than they seemed. The criticism that kept you awake last night, the financial worry that's been gnawing at you, the relationship conflict that feels so overwhelming, all of these shrink to their proper proportions when viewed from sufficient distance. This doesn't make them unimportant, but it prevents them from consuming all your mental energy. As we reach the end of this journey through Stoic wisdom, take a moment to consider how profoundly your life could change if you truly mastered these principles. Imagine waking up each morning with a sense of inner calm, knowing that whatever the day brings, you have the tools to handle it with grace and wisdom. Picture yourself moving through challenges without being overwhelmed, disappointments without being crushed, and successes without being intoxicated by them. Envision the freedom that comes from no longer being at the mercy of your circumstances or other people's opinions. This transformation doesn't happen overnight. The Stoics understood that philosophy is a practice, not a theory. Marcus Aurelius spent decades training his mind, and even in his personal journal, we see him reminding himself of basic principles, struggling with the same human challenges we all face. The difference is that he had a system, a set of mental tools that he could apply consistently to maintain his equilibrium and act according to his values. You now have access to these same tools. The question is, what will you do with them? Will you let this knowledge remain merely intellectual, or will you begin the daily practice of training your mind? Will you continue to be pushed around by your thoughts and emotions, or will you take back control and become the author of your own experience? Start small. Choose one principle that resonated most strongly with you and commit to practicing it for the next week. Maybe it's the morning reflection, spending 5 minutes each day preparing your mind for challenges. Perhaps it's the dichotomy of control, catching yourself when you worry about things you can't influence and redirecting your attention to what you can control. Or it might be the evening review, taking time each night to examine your thoughts and responses with gentle curiosity. Remember, the goal isn't perfection, it's progress. Even the greatest Stoic philosophers had bad days, made mistakes, and struggled with their own minds. The difference is that they had a framework for learning from these struggles and gradually becoming more skilled at the art of living well. The ancient Stoics proved that it's possible to maintain inner peace and act with virtue regardless of external circumstances. A slave became a teacher whose wisdom echoes through the centuries. An emperor facing plague and war found serenity in the midst of chaos. A wealthy advisor learned to hold his riches lightly and his principles firmly. If they could master their minds in the face of such challenges, what's possible for you? Your thoughts have shaped your life up to this point, but they don't have to determine your future. You have the power to change your mental habits, to choose your responses, and to align your life with your deepest values. The journey begins with a single step, the decision to take responsibility for your own mind and to treat that responsibility as the sacred trust it truly is. The Stoics believed that every human being has the potential for wisdom and virtue, regardless of their circumstances. They saw philosophy not as an academic exercise, but as medicine for the soul. Today, you've received a prescription for mental freedom and emotional resilience. The question now is whether you'll fill that prescription and begin the daily practice of taking back control of your thoughts and, in doing so, reclaiming your life. What principle will you start practicing today? Share your commitment in the comments below, and let's build a community of people dedicated to the ancient art of living wisely in a modern world. Your future self is waiting for you to make this choice. The Stoics have shown you the way. Now it's time to walk the path.